Kia ora tātou katoa, ko Kendall Flutey tōku ingoa. No ngai tahu, no Ngāti Kahununu ki te Wairarapa hoki, no Oto Tahio, ko te kaihanga o Banquer. Wonderful introduction. I'm Kendall, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you all on the close of what I've heard is a fantastic first day. Look, when I was briefed with the idea of a self-indulgent 20-minute talk about my journey, my thoughts on the state of Aotearoa, you'd think that might be music to a millennial's ears, right? What 22 to 37-year-old wouldn't like that opportunity? I'll tell you who. This one. She knew in 2001 that the limelight wasn't really her jam, and I know it to be true today. I think this picture does paint 1,000 words about my future prospects as a public speaker who enjoys it. But here we are, nonetheless. I think this is a really worthwhile conference, in particular with the theme being wellness. And I am glad to be here with you all this afternoon. But as a slightly reclusive introvert, it is daunting to take off that purple Banquer t-shirt that some of you may have seen me in, that I've been sort of glued to for the last 5 years. And I've somewhat been able to hide behind and to share not only the company's thoughts, but my thoughts as an individual and my personal struggles and triumphs along the way. I think we can get so used to thinking through the company lens that the thoughts almost become synonymous, and that we forget to check in with our own thoughts and opinions along the way as well. So that's what I'm going to endeavour to do this afternoon, and it's actually been a privilege to be able to wear that hat for a while and contemplating what I wanted to say. Decided I'm going to focus on my journey in understanding what success truly means to me and how I'm able to build the world I essentially want to live in. So everyone has a beginning to their story, the natural starting point. Some may commence at the logical point of birth. Others, first words, first memories, first kiss. Maybe for some, their first financial services conference. No takers? It's probably healthy, I don't know. The start of my story, it actually skips right through those formative years, which would have given you insight into those embarrassing kind of photos like this that make me super glad social media wasn't around in the 90s. Wouldn't have that been fun? How lucky are we? Dodged a bullet. Can you imagine all those bowl cuts on your Facebook feed? My rationale for skipping these years isn't because they weren't influential, important years of my life. They absolutely were. They heavily influenced who I am today and who I strive to be in the future. But there's one other memory that sort of stands alone in isolation as a turning point for me that's somewhat facilitated a bit of an awakening. And funnily enough, it was when I entered the professional services world. Prior to this point, I'd been aboard what I call the conveyor belt of education. I'd gone through, primary school, secondary school, to tertiary education without too much thought. But I had a firm attachment to what I thought success was based on the totality of my experiences to date. And it was a really simple equation, a little naive, but we're in a safe space. So to me, success at that point was a good education, a prestigious job, and wealth. And I sort of felt like I'd secured the first, having left as a university graduate. I had my foot in the door with the second, had a graduate role, and I was confident that the third would arrive in time. But my story really begins when this construct was completely shattered, when this belief of what success was no longer resonated with me. And this event, it was triggered in my 3rd week on the job as a graduate accountant. It was absolutely terrifying. It was as though the man behind the curtain had sort of, been revealed. It was like Santa and the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy all at once. Because unlike yourselves, this wasn't my passion. It wasn't my calling, and I lacked the drive as a result. And it was clear that I wouldn't thrive, professionally or personally, in that environment. There was no really big bang that ignited that moment. I think, truth be told, it'd probably been bubbling beneath the surface for a while, and it just made itself known to me. And with that came a wave of discomfort and realisation that what I'd been striving towards was in stark contrast to what I actually wanted. And that really is daunting and terrifying, because at the time I'd invested 17 years of my life, a good majority, and tens of thousands of dollars, on an education to foster that path, to arrive at a point that I now wanted to flee from. I'm not sure if anyone has experienced this firsthand, but I think the medical term for it is quarter-life crisis, or breakdown, whatever you want, take your pick. I'm going with quarter-life crisis. But importantly, I quite quickly realised the error of my ways, that I hadn't actually made a single choice to date. Yes, I'd selected my subjects at school, my courses at university, I joined clubs and societies, sports teams, applied for jobs, moved cities. But throughout all of that, whilst on the conveyor belt, I don't actually think I made one purposeful decision. Instead, I'd been happy just sort of kicking back and going with the societal flow, drifting me towards, a semi-palatable destination for someone like me, aspirational enough, low risk, might attain the 3 Bs one day. And when I observe Aotearoa today, this is what jumps out at me, and particularly with my generation. There are so many of us who give up the agency of our own lives, and we're apathetic. And as financial professionals, you'll see it in market participation levels or KiwiSaver switching rates. We place a lot of trust in the system, and we assume that it's going to take us to a destination that's going to satiate us. And when I peered that back, I concluded that it's a lot easier to go through life not making choices, because then you're never responsible when a choice goes wrong. I think that's what I'd feared. But in itself, the irony is that that's the worst choice you can make, to hand over your agency. This awakening, it resulted in what can only be described as a flurry of choices in short succession. So pretty quickly after that, I quit my job with no other employment lined up. I chose to re-educate myself in a non-traditional manner through a boot camp, a software boot camp. And then I subsequently chose to change industries. And I also gave myself the luxury of time to really ponder what success meant to me, something that I thought I had a grapple on, but clearly didn't. As you can recall, that previous formula: good education, prestigious job, and wealth equals success. Now, I was really stress testing this formula as I slept on couches at friends' flats in Wellington and enrolled in that tech boot camp that wasn't the university degree that I'd been told and had believed was equated to success, and found out that, I could no longer afford to pay rent, and suddenly couches did become very, very comfortable. If I'd held on to that definition of success during that state of flux, I would have been pretty despondent. So I was glad that I gave myself the opportunity to explore a new definition. That said, I don't think it's very strange that I arrived at that first definition of success. This is how a lot of us view the world, in particular today, my generation, because this is the economic and political system that we live within. We're incentivized to strive for profits, for self-interest, to maximise our resources. And when I critically re-examined that definition of success, I understood that it was not all completely self-seeking. There was a lot of good in there. I just sort of lost my way at some stage. One interesting point was the concept of wealth. When we think of wealth, we probably think of, I think of hoarding material possessions, or just simply being rich, or having something desirable in abundance. But the word wealth has actually been exploited over the century. It's lost its roots, its origins. The archaic Middle English definition of wealth is very interesting. And that definition of wealth, as it was intended, is well-being. The word wealth meant well-being. To be wealthy meant to be well. So at the 2019 Towards Wellbeing conference that we're all currently attending, it really could have been the Towards Wealth conference, and if the intentions of the word had remained the same, and no one would have been worried that we were sitting in here scheming, nobody would have batted an eyelid. Understanding this and a few other things, I soon settled on my new definition of success, which rings true today, and which I believe is worth committing myself to, and that is striving towards collective wellbeing, which is why I was delighted to be invited along this year and share in this kaupapa. Our companies all have visions, they have mission statements, they have purposes, and we spout these to the press, to our new employees, to each other as a yardstick of what we're trying to achieve. As individuals, we should have these too. We have purpose, and a lot of us use our purpose interchangeably with our definition of success. So I finally understood how important getting that definition of success correct was for me, as it allows us to make choices and to contribute to the world and build the world that we want to live in. So as an unemployed, albeit enlightened 22-year-old, with a bit more certainty around what success meant to me, I started asking some of the bigger questions. What's preventing collective well-being? Why are we so self-serving? How come there's a bit of excess over here and not enough over there? Why aren't we considering the externalities in our everyday decisions? I came to understand that, given the incentives at play and human nature, what more could we really expect? For decades, we've been behaving in ways that benefit us, our immediate circle, often at the expense of others. I did it, been operating on with a zero-sum mindset, convinced that scarcity is real and true and coming and nipping at our heels. And we're obsessed with money. I know it's a bold statement for this conference, but when you stop to think about it, our love affair is a little irrational, maybe a bit primitive. It got me thinking that perhaps it's not the people that were broken, maybe I wasn't broken in my prior thinking, and that perhaps it's the system and the world and the force that forces us to behave like that in a way that I don't think we would when we engage with each other as people. And this is when, serendipitously, another person entered my life and transformed that thinking, that pondering into impact. I just secured sort of my dream tech job in Wellington, working with clients like the NZX, several banks, some government agencies, all the way through to startups, as cutting code as a software developer. And the idea for Banquer had been planted and the first lines of code cut, so it was a pretty positive time in my life. I was venting to a particular advisor who I'd met through Banquer about the fundamental issues I saw in our country: inequality, rampant consumerism, a deeply unhappy cohort of Kiwis that seriously needs to be addressed, and our apathy towards agency. And I don't know what are you sort of expecting from that sort of venting situation? I didn't get the sympathy I was after. What I got instead was a challenge. He said, if you don't like, in an American accent, I'm not going to try, if you don't like the world, why don't you just build the world you want to live in? And if anyone else had said this to me, if my mum or my sister, goodness me, had said that, I would have assumed they were being facetious or patronising me or just trying to shut down that vent altogether. But he really meant it as a call to action. It was genuine, and it was an eye-opening statement for me that spoke to me about the choices I made, not only having an impact on my individual life, but the impact they could have in a greater capacity. And in some level, I truly believe it was the permission I needed at that time. Sometimes we wait, seeking for permission. For me, I had been used to things being authorised in a professional capacity, waiting for permission all the time from someone above. And I was guilty of doing that in my personal life as well. Even as CEOs, I think it's still plausible that we seek permission when we can actually be the agents of change. I now understood that we all held the power to make a great change if we chose to act on that. And with the right definition of success in place, we can not only influence our lives, but the lives of others. A few weeks after that encounter, you might be sensing a pattern, I quit my job. A job that I really found fulfillment in, so it was a big decision. But I wanted to have the opportunity to test that assumption, that we could build the world we want to live in, even if we didn't think we were fully equipped right now. Whether the acts of a few can really change the course of a nation or a globe. And that's when I went full-time with Banquer. And that was 5 years ago, and I haven't really looked back since. And although this is a story about my personal journey, reinforced by the fact I shared 2 photos from the family archives, 2 out of 3, Banquer is synonymous with that journey. Over the last 5 years, through our financial education software, I've been able to slowly but surely try and chip away at that world that future that I really want for our nation, one where individuals aren't financially misled or disadvantaged or deceived, one where there's collective prosperity, and educated participants are forcing the market to act efficiently and effectively. That's the kind of world I want to live in and build, where society thrives. And I know that may sound like a pipe dream at this stage, but just give me 20 years. I'm willing to throw that to the room and sign it away. Give me 20 years, and I truly think as a nation that we can get there. I want one where we're truly all wealthy, and that's in the old school definition of wealth, not the modern misappropriation of the word. And this is why one of my major concerns isn't that we're lacking in innovation or investment, or the AI coming in, Neuralink hasn't progressed fast enough. It's that we might be shooting at the wrong goal or playing the wrong game altogether, forgetting that we're in this together, and there's a person on the other side of the screen. The data points are people points, and we're inextricably linked in our small nation. So we need everyday leaders who make choices that are bold, and who understand that success isn't an individual pursuit. I also believe that a lot of the leaders of our financial world in Aotearoa are in this room right now. And I'm not exclusively speaking to anyone with the CEO title or in the C-suite. That's what it's called, right? C-suite? Sure. You're just different. You think differently. You have a vision. You put people first, and you don't want to just meet targets. One of the first questions you're going to ask is why. Even if you're not confident enough to speak aloud yet, you're asking it. And you understand that if we stick to the status quo, we're not all going to prosper. And look, I probably know I'm too late for this moment, as it's clear that most of you have found your passion and you're thriving. But if one person needs this, I think it's worth it, so I'm going to do it. If anyone in this room is waiting for permission, here it is. You probably don't need it, just like I didn't really need it. You probably definitely don't need it from me. But you've got permission. Everyone in this room has permission to change the world, to build the world they want to live in, to break it, completely shatter it, and rebuild it right down to the colour of the tablecloths. You're the leaders, financial leaders of this country. You have everything you need. And I think the fact you chose to be here today at this Wellbeing conference and to stay to hear the ramblings of a 28-year-old, I think that really speaks significantly to your character. So thank you very much for your attention. Ngā mihi kia koutou. And I'm really happy to take any questions if there are any. Was questions a thing, or am I going out on a limb?
If people want to ask, maybe you've covered it all, Kendall, so fantastically.
Cool.
Looks like you're off the hook.
Oh, yes.
Engaging with school kids, that's obviously a big part of being attached.
Correct.
How did you go about making those courses that you understood they were going to take back?
Making our content for the platform? Yeah, cool. So I am merely a quarter of Banquer. The Banquer sort of origin story came from my brother, my much younger brother. He was 12 years old at the time, I'm sorry if anyone's heard this, and his teacher was financially educating them in class, and he just hit the mark completely. My brother was so engaged, coming home, asking me about taxes, about companies, about insurance. You know, a 12-year-old kid, that was groundbreaking to me, and this was right in that state of flux where I'd thrown it to the wind and quit my job and kind of scratching my head. And I met up with his teacher the very next day, and I was just inspired by him. So he is one of my co-founders. So the content for our platform comes from over a decade of him refining offline Banquer in the classroom in high decile, low decile, various schools throughout the country really, and ensuring that that content worked in those various situations. And today we just work with our users, you know, our 2,500 teachers. They're not short of suggestions, so filtering through them is a bit of a challenge, but we listen to them and we give them what they want, and likewise we listen to the kids too. Is there anything else? Or? Great, thank you very much. Mm-hmm.